Welcome! In this series of short videos, we will look at topics common to both the PowerBasic console and Windows compilers. Today we will look at using an API to connect to the ChatGPT from OpenAI. There has been a great deal of discussion recently regarding ChatGPT. Artificial intelligence and the ability to actually use it to solve problems is much in the news. What we're going to look at today is how to interface a PowerBasic application with the ChatGPT OpenAI. I'll put the links in the description below to the website we're currently looking at. This is a web page where you can actually sign up to use the API. Once you have registered on the website, you can peruse its documentation. But before we can start using this within PowerBasic, we'll need to set up an API key. The API key is used to authenticate you on the site. You can do this quite easily by going to this page and clicking the Create New Secret Key, and then copying that into your application. So now that we have that set up, let's have a look at the code in PowerBasic. What I'm going to do first is to show you the application in its working form. After that, we can then have a look at the code to see how it was done. What we have on screen is a fairly simple dialog with a number of text boxes. Once these text boxes are actually populated, we can submit our request to ChatGPT. I've set up the application to hardcode the URL, the model we're using, the maximum number of tokens, and 2 additional boxes need to be populated: the API key, which will be specific to yourself, and also the prompt, the question you want to ask the system. So if we paste in our API key, and we'll now put in a question for the system. And then we can submit our request. And there we have the response coming back from the system. So this application can be quite easily used to send your requests off to the system and wait for a response coming back. So let's now have a look at the code underlying our application. Although I've created this application as a PowerBasic Windows application, it could quite easily be used by the console compiler as well. We're using the Windows application today as we wanted a dialog on screen. Referenced in our source code is an include file, chatgpt.include. This contains the function that actually does the communication with the GPT system itself. So this include file could be called from a console application. It's important to note that our application here today is using the Jose Roca API libraries rather than the ones that come with PowerBasic itself. I've included the link here on screen to allow you to download them from his website, as you'll need these include files to compile the application. In the Windows options, in the compiler tab, you can actually designate which set of libraries are the primary ones that your PowerBasic compiler will look for to include. At the moment, I have the Jose API set up as the ones I want to compile with. If I wanted to change to the standard out of the box, I would then move that up to the top of the list. This allows you the flexibility to use more than one set of API routines. I got the idea to do this video from the PowerBasic website itself. On the forums there, another user has actually posted the code to connect to the ChatGPT system. I've credited him at the top of our include file, and added most of the comments he actually had in his code. So to begin this code overview, let's have a look at the dialog itself. The dialog function itself will set up all the objects on the dialog. The text boxes, the labels, and the setting up of the fonts. I've added fonts in here to make them a little bigger on screen so they're easier to see. In the event handler for the dialog, the callback function, this is where we need to put code in to pick up what the user has actually keyed on screen. In the initialized dialog event, this is where we're populating 3 of our text boxes with default values. Further down the code is the event which handles the pressing of the submit button. When that occurs, we're picking up all the text boxes values from the screen. We are populating a series of variables. Some are wide string and one is an ordinary string variable for the max tokens. And then we're calling a validation routine to make sure that all the boxes have been filled in. It's important when you do Windows dialogues that you validate what the users put in. So having a series of validation routines for your dialogues is very useful. If we have a quick look at the validation routine, this is taking in all the parameters for the function. And we're dimensioning a small numeric array. This stores the Windows handles of each of the dialogues. Using this method, we can use a for next loop to step through each of these to ensure that they have been populated. And as we're storing the label as well, if one of the text boxes has not been populated, we can change the colour of one of the labels to indicate to the user which field needs to be updated. If we try running that code now, and if we attempt to submit a request without populating either the prompt or the API key, it will give us an error message on screen and turn the values red. Once you click OK, it will set the focus to one of the boxes that needs to be populated. If we populate that and hit the submit button, it will then indicate there is still one field to be filled in. So this ensures that all the data is actually validated before we actually submit a request to the system. So on the assumption that this isValid input function returns the value true, then we know that all the boxes have been populated and we can go ahead and call our routine. And this function in our include file is called run-chat-GPT query. It's picking up all the parameters, the prompt containing the question the user has asked, the URL to which we're going to query, the model we're going to use, the API key for authentication, the maximum number of tokens, and a value to store the output, what we're going to put on screen as the answer to the user. What comes back in the output will contain the /n where we want a carriage return line feed. So we're doing a simple replace command to replace that with a carriage return line feed so we can actually fold the lines down in the output box on screen. So let's have a look at the function itself, the one that actually does the querying. Here is a run-chat-GPT query function, taking in all the parameters as W strings and a string for output. So we're going to be using the COM object to actually perform this query. So we're setting up an object, XML, as an iServer XML HTTP request. And we're setting that to new COM and the MS XML to server XML HTTP. If we manage to instantiate that object, then we can attempt to open the connection using POST with the URL we've passed in the parameters. Then we need to set the headers, the content type, the application, the authorization, and the bearer with our API key. This authenticates us to the system. And then the last thing we need to do is to send our prompt. With our prompt containing the text the user has keyed in, the model we're using, the maximum number of tokens, and the send command will then send that to the remote system. We merely then need to wait for a response. And we can use the ready state to test to see if the value is other than 4. If the value equals 4, then our while loop will complete. And to allow the system to catch up and allow the dialog to be moved around the screen if the user wishes to do that, we're using a sleep for 1 second, so we're only testing for completion every second. And we're doing a dialog do events to give Windows some time to actually handle anything happening on the dialog. Once we do have a response, we can pick that up using the OXML response text. And I'm using a little bit of parsing to chop that up and pull back just the text we actually get. Additionally, you may want to actually save the values you get coming back from the system itself. So I've created a save query function, which is using the parse.json function itself. Parse.json is a function I created to allow you to build up the value that's in the JSON into something that's human readable. And our save query does nothing more elaborate than save the query to a text file. And here is our text file. We have the prompt from the user on the first line, and then we have the JSON that comes back in a format that's easy to read. As you can see, the wording of your prompt, your question to the system, is very important. Depending how you phrase the question, you may or may not get an answer that's usable. This small application is barely touching the extent of what you can do in this system. The website has a great deal of documentation and examples of what you can actually do with it. While the system is free to use, it does have its limitations. In signing up for the free trial, you get effectively $18 worth of credit on the system. And each query you run on the system does actually reduce the value of this balance. And the credit does indeed have an expiry date. However, the cost for each transaction is minimal, and should give you plenty of opportunity to actually explore to see what the system can actually do. So in summary, what we've seen today is that we can indeed interface your PowerBasic application with ChatGPT. And this may well open up a whole new world of coding in PowerBasic. However, that's it for today. Thank you for watching.